Hey, it's ODB, aka the Lincoln Addict. I uploaded one video that was the start on Saturday morning. I did finish on Saturday, which was pretty cool. And what I'm going to do is, obviously, I only had one set of hands that day, so I wasn't able to really show. I kind of just explained what I was going to do. I'm going to kind of give you an overview of what I did because now all of the plug wires are on. I'm not going to really take that apart. But because the kit comes with a different set, which is not the set that you need, it has two different sets, I'll be able to kind of show you a little bit on how it went down. So I'm going to hand the phone to my helper here. And one of the things I didn't show was this is the MSD little tool. And it's basically allows for you to crimp on the end of the spark plug wire. So the first thing you're going to want to do is they come like this. And you have to end up cutting them to length. And I kind of mentioned, I didn't actually end up changing the lengths that much. What I ended up doing was I took the existing one off and I looked at it and I was like, it's not too bad. And I ended up cutting it to almost that same length, right? So I forgot I had purchased these nicer cutters, which came in really handy because once I marked it with electrical tape right where I wanted to cut it, I was able to basically just come in here and take this and get a nice clean cut, right? Actually, let me recut that. That one didn't cut too clean. Something similar to that. Now, actually, when I cut it yesterday, it didn't leave that little piece, but you get the idea. At that point, I kind of factored in what I needed in terms of the length because I had taken one of the ends, and again, these are the ones that you don't use. It's real simple to figure out the difference of the two. I had taken, and based upon YouTube videos I had watched, you fold this over and you put this in about right here. Now the brass looking ones are a little bit different, but you pretty much fold this over. And what I did was I was able to eyeball and kind of see how far I needed to or have this little wick out of the end, right? And again, you leave the black part on there. And on this one, it's a little bit different. So if I was going to crimp this one, I would probably bring it to about right here. And I would go from there. So again, these are a different style. I don't know if these are like more on boats or whatever, but you know, it's pretty simple to figure out which of the two that you need. And once you cut it to length, you put it into, this is the same little MSD tool. You stick it into this, there's two different sides, which I think one might be a tad bigger, but they're about the same to me. And what I had figured out with the actual ends is if I put this little, the little wire right to the very edge of this on my tool bench, I knew I needed to cut to about right there with the razor blade. So I would take the razor blade and I would hold it right here and I would twist this back and forth, okay, with one hand. And you just do a couple rotations and it's basically going to have that where it's cut. And then I took, believe it or not, just a pair of pliers on that end and you just pull a little bit and that piece will come off, and then you know you have about the length that you need, which again, on my 67 Lincoln, or 64 Lincoln, was about from here all the way to the sheeting cutoff there, the insulation, all right? So what you do from there is you flap this over, and again, this is not the exact one. The other ones are on the car. They give you just enough. What you end up doing is when you flap that over, you're going to stick it into here. And this one's a little bit different in terms of the length right here, but it gives you an idea. And you can see it right now, it comes to about right at the end. You'll see a lot of videos where someone will take the pliers and they'll basically kind of crimp these together just a little bit. And before you know it, it's going to kind of look like, this is one I just did as a test. It's going to kind of look like that with the one side. And then what I was doing yesterday is I would kind of flip this around, put the plier on here, and I would kind of crimp it down to the point where you're about right here, where it's kind of like it's starting to look flat, okay? I always double check right here that the little, the actual wire is still right where I want it to be, right? And then you take this little tool, and this part here goes on the top, and you just push that in. And I kind of eyeballed it to see about where I wanted it based upon the actual ones I used yesterday. But give or take, it might be around right there. This one's a little bit different. You might want to bring it right to the edge of where the insulation's at, okay? So that's the one side. And it will kind of sit in there a little bit because you've crimped those ends. Again, that's what you'll see in other people's YouTube's videos, so you don't need a second set of hands. And then you take this, the little die, and you stick it, for the most part, about right here where it's flush, give or take, all right? Now we're gonna walk over to the vise real quick on the side, and then I'll show you guys. Now, the one other thing I'll point out, okay, before we do this is these boots, I forgot to mention this, these boots you really wanna put on first, okay? Of course, the other end of this is gonna be where you're putting on the spark plug. But I would highly suggest, and this is where other people have made this mistake in their videos, they haven't mentioned this, and they kind of get, there's a lot of comments about it, is this boot, if you put the boot on first before you do what I just did, it's going to save you a lot of time. Now, these are a pain to put on. I took a little bit of either lubricant or a little bit of motor oil, literally put it on this wire, and made sure that some was in here and here, and put it on, and used a little shop rag and literally pushed it through and put a little screwdriver in to kind of angle it out to this point. And once it starts coming out, you have to really push it with, get a little rag because you're going to have some oil on it, and really push it through, and it will eventually come out enough that you can maybe grab it with a little rag and you can pull it. But I'm telling you, if you do that first, it does make it easier. Now, I did forget to do that on my third one, and I was like, oh damn, what am I going to do? The other ones that are on there are like almost a 90-degree out of the actual packaging. So what I had to do is I had to bend it straight and put this on there, and I was able to get it on, but it was a lot tougher, okay? So put the boots on first, and let's just walk over here real quick to the side. And I'll show you, I've got like a little bench vise, and I'll go ahead and show you what I'm gonna do here. A little darker over here, but basically this has this little level piece right here, and I always did it this way yesterday so I could actually see. I'm going to open the vise up a little bit, and I'm going to push this till it's flat right here, and if I really want to, I can just kind of make sure that this is flat as well, and I'm going to tighten it a little bit. I'm going to take a look to make sure that this is out of the way, and I'm going to double check real quick to make sure that the actual piece is right where I want it. This is kind of all flush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this down. Now, they say not to over tighten them. You'll kind of get a feeling of you'll kind of know once you got it to where you want it. And then when you peel this off, you'll see it crimps it on right there. So it's pretty simple. This one, I didn't take as much time, and I'll go ahead and grab this back here. On this one, I didn't take as much time yesterday, or just a minute ago, as I should say. I didn't take as much time to use the pliers to kind of crimp those perfectly. And you can kind of see it there because it didn't crimp down. I'm kind of doing this quicker because of the video. But I wanted you to see the premise of it. Basically, all you're doing is you have that lead, that main plug wire. It's flapped over and it's up against this, and someone else in their videos mentioned that with these little ribs in here, it actually helps to secure it down there, and that's what sends the signal, if you will. So again, this one I wish I would have spent a little bit more time, but I'm kind of trying to do it for the video. It would have crimped down pretty much perfectly. So if you just take your time and you use those pliers like I started to do a few minutes ago, and you kind of just get them where it's just barely touching here, kind of like I did. Once you put it in there and you go slow, it'll smash these down. Really, all that happened here is this side should have did the same thing. And literally taking my time yesterday, I did not have any kind of challenge like that. like you just see right here. Because like this, to me, I wouldn't have been as happy with it. Probably would be totally fine. And then at that point, this would have been on here, you know, whether it's facing here, you know, it would have been back here, right, for the most part. And then at that point, I would take my cloth on this hand and kind of hold it, and I would just pull this a little bit at a time, and you're going to get to the point where it's going to come off, and it's, you know, this is going to be inside there. Now, on these, they look like they're kind of, you know, they look like they're brass. And these are a totally different look. And if you watch my video that I uploaded before this one, you'll actually get a chance to see what it looks like. And what I did to make sure that I was doing it right is when I had all of these wires off, I actually had taken one and popped it in there, just the end. And I was, you know, I was able to say, okay, yep, it goes down that far. That's exactly what I'm going to need. This is the right end to crimp it in. And again, if you haven't done this stuff before, I mean, I've done it one time. It's been a while ago. You know, I just wasn't as comfortable doing it, so I wanted to double check everything. And when I kind of made sure I figured it out, obviously, you know, first that these aren't the right ones, because that's going to be more of one where it's like an external type one that snaps onto, which is not the 462 or 430. And once I crimped them on, I started off doing one at a time. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, I started with the backs. So the ones that were the furthest. And by the time I got to this guy here, I took off both sides, and they were pretty much the same length. If they weren't the same, what I did was I actually took the shorter one and I put it on that side to double check to see if it would work, and it would. And then I would come back to the back of the car, and I would use my electrical tape and tape off, like, you know, let's say it was going to be right up to where that P's at. I would do a tape line. I would take the cutters, I would cut it, and then I would go into the tool that I left over there, spin it with the razor blade, cut the end off, take the pliers, pull that little bit of sheathing or insulation off, and then fold that flap over, which is important. Right? That's like the most important thing. Make sure it's kind of set in there right. I would double check it, especially the first few times I was doing it. Take the pliers, put it on the end, and you can kind of see that's one I barely messed with the pliers. But you'd put it on the end there and kind of close it down a little bit where those are barely hitting the wires, and then put it into the little tool and put it into the vise, and then boom, that was done. But literally, one of the hardest parts that was something that I didn't expect was just the boots, man. They were a pain. They're so tight on there. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just the more little bit of oil that I used on my fingers, I literally had a little quart of oil, and I would kind of dump it over and get some on my fingers and put it on the plug wires. And I know some people might be like, well, that's not a good thing to do because, you know, you're going to have spark on it, whatever. I literally cleaned every speck of oil off of it. I mean, it wasn't a whole lot. But if you have something else that's a spray lube or something, preferably that's non-flammable, don't get me wrong. But if you use something like what I used, make sure you clean all of it off. And that, I'll tell you what, will help so much, because when I got towards the end of the 8 wires I had to make, plus the coil wire, which you have to do both ends on that. So you basically have 8, 9, 10 connections that you have to do. When I got towards the end, I was putting enough lube that it was made my job a lot easier to make, or, you know, to make that one wire, because you got to get the boot on first, then you got to do the work, then you got to pull the boot back to cover the actual crimped end. So I hope that helps. I'm not an expert when it comes to a lot of this stuff, so I do watch a lot of videos, and I take advice from other people. I know some people that are really good mechanics that say, man, I don't like making plug wire ends. I mean, it wasn't super fun, but I knew that if I wanted to go with a nicer, higher end, there's your 8.0 Pertronix, that I was going to have to do it. Now, you may decide to spend a little bit more time. I I spent some time looking at the links, and like, you know, for me, like this to me is getting too close to the header. You know, I don't want it sitting like that. But my only choice really here is to then adjust here. And this is kind of an older one, I think. But, you know, at some point, that's about as taut as I can get it right there. And then I can pull this up a little bit, okay? On these, I don't know about, you know, probably the same with all the Mustangs and all the different Ford vehicles and stuff. The main thing you want to make sure is when you put the air cleaner on that it clears all this. And you may look at this and go, well, man, it's not going to clear. I made sure last night when I put the air cleaner on, this was the one that was giving me a little bit of a pain, and I had kind of moved it. I put these on there pretty much the same way. I don't know if I took a photo or I just took like kind of a mental note, but I tried to put these back on facing the same way that they were, and the air cleaner fits on here and it tightens down fine. So, you know, that's the main thing. I kind of loosely put these on, and I loosely put these on, you know, the plug wires. And then when I got down to the end, I put my last one on last night or yesterday. I went back and, of course, I pulled these up, and I spent the time to make sure that these were really on there. And, you know, if you haven't done this stuff a lot, I mean, you can't see it, but you can kind of feel if it's there. You want to make sure you go and do that. And again, just routing these wires is key. You'll see that, you know, this one might be a tad long for what it is, but, you know, there's plenty of space up in here for me to allow for these wires to kind of just sit right here. It's not that big a deal. And then you just take the boot, and it kind of sits right there. So hopefully that helps you. I could not find any videos about Pertronix. But if you watch other videos, the only thing I wish I would have did a little bit better in this video is crimp this on a little bit better. But, you know, once you get those right where, like I said earlier, and you crimp that down, it'll crimp down perfectly. And, I mean, again, this probably isn't ever going to go anywhere. But at the same time, I just would want a little bit better crimp. I did take photos of the crimp because I could actually, you know, easily do those when it was in the vise. And I will put those into the lincolnforum.net under customized section, and then under build threads, which is Project Smuggler's Blues. You'll see the build thread in there, and I'll put those photos in there. That way you can actually see what the crimp looks like. The coil was super simple. I did have to re-pull this out. The way this one end is here, they kind of, as I mentioned, they come out of the box at almost a 90. And it kind of was like facing this way. So I actually pulled this out yesterday, and I was able to better position to get that side of it in there. And then I just slid this back in and tighten down that bolt. So you had to do the 1, the 2, and then all 8 of the plug wires. Of course, these ends down here, they're already on, but I did put the sleeves on first, as I mentioned in the other video. The car pretty much fired right up. After I primed it a little bit, it fired right up, and everything is great. So yeah, Pertronix. And then the only thing I haven't showed here is the cap is still on. The Pertronix itself, the Igniter 2, is super easy. I mean, anybody can install this. It's literally, you take out the old stuff, you put the new thing in, you use their new little screw, bolt, whatever you want to call it, screw, and then you just screw it down, and there's a little clear thing that you use to gap it. You kind of hold it together and you get the perfect gap. You push the 2 pieces together, and then you just tighten it down, and it's done. There's other videos on that if you want to see how to install the Pertronix. But ODB, the Lincoln Addict, hopefully this helps you. And leave a comment. Check out Lincoln Addict Podcast if you can. Gotcha. Peace.